Today let's put together a list of every material and tool you would need if you would want to start oil painting. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In the last couple of weeks I received quite a few questions concerning what one would need to buy in order to try out oil painting. And I totally get where the questions come from, because as in photography and any other type of art, there is so much tools and gear and stuff out there that if you are not familiar with the technique, it is very difficult to decide what is absolutely necessary to buy in order to have a decent start and what is completely, well, a gadget or maybe premature when you start. So in order to save you some nerve and prevent you from throwing away your money for things that are absolutely not necessary when starting out, I have put together in this video a list of materials or types of tools that I believe would be necessary and useful if you are a beginner in oil painting. And before we get into it, I wanted to announce real quickly that Ninfa Gallery is going to be 2 years old on the 22nd of April. Yes, it's already been 2 years of this beautiful adventure. So first of all, I wanted to thank all of those who accompanied me on my artistic journey, my friends, family, and of course collectors who made it possible for me to live my dream. And I also wanted to benefit from the occasion in order to launch a little sale both on my website and my Etsy store. Everything will be 50% off, and that means both original oil paintings and lino prints throughout the birthday weekend and the day itself. So basically from Saturday the 20th of April to Monday the 22nd, up until midnight, of course. And of course I will leave both links to the website and my Etsy store below in the description box. So if there is any artwork in particular that you like, there's no time like the present. First of all, in order to lay down some basics, I would like to caveat this video with saying that I'm talking here to someone who's maybe already familiar with another technique, maybe with watercolors or gouache or pastels, I don't know, and who would like to dabble his or her feet into oil paintings, but without being sure that this is really for him or her, whether this technique will be what really speaks to him and her. So the main principle here and the main goal is to collect all the tools that will enable you to try it out without investing too much money into something that you might not end up liking. So we will have to find a balance between something that is fairly performant, functional, and gives you the look and feel of the technique without costing too much money. So something that is very good value for money here. Now, let's start with the first category being the support you would be painting on. First of all, I would not recommend you investing in huge canvases from the beginning. Of course, we have the money aspect here, but also something of a practicability, because you would need a support that would allow you to fix a huge canvas in your apartment. You will have to make the space for it, you will have to invest the money in it, and you would use up quite a lot of paint tubes more if you are painting on a huge scale, right? So for all those reasons, I would suggest you start out with a smaller format and also something that you can buy in multiples. And I'm not saying that you cannot buy canvases in multiples, but once again, it's a question of space and money, whereas you can buy a block of carton boards, for instance. So you have, I only have the cover left because I used mine up. So you have the Georgian oil painting art boards. They come, for instance, here in a set of 10 and are basically cardboards with a coating that is pretty close to a canvas. It's not exactly a canvased cardboard, all right, it's not exactly the same. There's a coating on it, but it will do the job. So it is thick enough in order to absorb your paints. It is quite light, but it is also sturdy, so this is something that you can bring along on plein air sessions, for instance. This is a good way to go. So mine is roughly 30 by 42 centimeters, which is a nice landscape format, but I believe they do other formats as well. You would have to look it up. I had another one here that is by Canson, as you can see here. This is basically thick paper, heavyweight paper for oil painting. This is how they describe it. So it's a linen finish paper ready to use for oil, acrylic and oil pastels. So same principle, different formats. This one is 33 by 41. It's textured as well as the Georgian one. Now, to choose between these two, it depends on your needs. If you want to work more outside, I will suggest the Georgian. If you're fine with working indoors in the studio, the Canson is maybe a cheaper alternative, if I remember correctly. But these are quite thin, okay? There's no cardboard behind there, so this is really thick paper, that's all. So transportation wise, not great, okay? But painting in the studio, perfect. Do I have some samples left, maybe, to show you the difference? This one is the Georgian one. I will zoom in so that you can see it is sturdy and thicker, and it has this linen coating, let's say. And the Canson one, I believe, is this. Much thinner, as you can see. Texture wise, they are really very similar. Maybe the Georgian one is a little bit more textured. Now, if you have started with one of these two papers and you feel like you might like oil painting, I would suggest that you try out maybe a small format of a real canvas. It can be a cheap canvas mounted on a board like this, but it will give you the look and feel of what a real canvas would look like. It is more textured, it is thicker, so it is nice to experiment with something that is, real canvas. Moving forward, I suggest you stay on a smaller scale like this so that it doesn't cost you an awful lot of money. Another alternative would be a canvased carton or cardboard. As you can see, this is extremely sturdy. It is cardboard that doesn't just have a finish on it, but really has a layer of canvas glued to it. So it is something in between the Georgian board, the Georgian paper and a canvas. This is something in between. It is very light. It is relatively cheap. I believe that for this one I paid maybe about €1, €1.50 maybe. So to test out how a real canvas surface would feel, this is a great option. As to the palette, once again, the reflex would be to go for something that is easy to clean up. So those, glass color palettes that you can put on top of your table, for instance, put your paints on top, and then when you're done with your painting session, just wish it away with a cloth or something, and you would be ready to go. Now, once again, those are not really cheap, and while I do believe that this is the best way to go moving forward if you want to stick with oil paintings, to begin with, I would recommend going for something like this. I have lost the cover of it, so I cannot tell you the brand or something, but basically it's a set of coated cardboard color palettes. So they're all attached together like a notepad would be, okay? And so on one side they are coated and really smooth, so this is where you put your paint on. I'm having it on the wrong way around, but never mind. And the other surface is just papery. So as you can imagine, these are no great friend of the environment, because basically the principle here is that you would throw them away once you're through with them, because obviously they are not sturdy enough, and if you continue building up your piles of paint one on top of the other, at some point you will tear through the paper. This is normal. This is where you would throw your paper color palette away and start the next one. Personally, I use these for travel when I'm on plein air, because it is more lightweight, and also I don't have to think about how I store them when we travel. But I think this would be a great alternative also for people who are starting out. Obviously, do not stick with them once you decided whether you want to continue doing oil painting, okay? Because once again, they are not great for the environment. It's just a cheap beginner solution, right? Okay, now that we've dealt with the surfaces that we're painting on, let's dive into what probably is most interesting, so the colors. Same disclaimer as in the beginning, you have to find colors by brands that are somewhere in between the very high quality fine art type tubes and those very cheap student ones. I would personally really advise you against going for the cheapest paints, because they won't perform well, and this might bias your opinion or your judgment on your experience, because you might not have a very pleasant experience with them simply because of their texture not being what a classical oil paint really will be at the end of the day. You will not be able to build up the color in a very semi-transparent, smooth way, or they will have horrible drying times. These are all very unpleasant side effects that can really bias you against oil painting. So I would rather do two things. First of all, opt for those in the middle, and second of all, maybe not go for a lot of colors, but rather invest in something that is in the middle, okay? So you save the money by not buying an awful lot of different paints, but you invest it intelligently into good established brands. Now, personally, I mostly have painted with Sennelier and my Discovery brand. Well, the paints that I've started with were the Le Franc Bourgeois ones, but I'm not sure that you can get them anywhere else other than in France. I will include a zoom into those and a link maybe, but I'm really not sure as to whether you can find them outside of France. So I will just take a list from Jackson's Art, because this is the website that I'm most frequently ordering from, and will sort the traditional oil paintings by price, and will tell you what I would do in your place. De La Rowney, I've literally no experience whatsoever with this producer. Apparently they are the cheapest ones. I would go for either the Winsor and Newton ones. I have great gouaches by Winsor and Newton, so I'm very satisfied. It is a good brand, so I would presume that their oil paints are not horrible. And they seem to be on the cheaper side, so this would be maybe an option to consider. Gamblin is a great brand. They seem to be more or less of the same price as the Winsor & Newton, so you can go for the artist oil paint in the Gamblin brand. And then rather quickly you go into those very classical like Sennelier Rive Gauche versions. They are not the highest quality of Sennelier, but this is still quite good. But you start to feel the price increase. I would maybe try out the Winsor & Newton Winton oil paint or the Gamblin artist oil paint. How do they describe? Winton is a traditional range of oil colors from Winsor & Newton. Made from moderately priced pigments, Winton are formulated for students and amateur artists or professional painters requiring large volumes of color within moderate cost limits. Fair enough, right? So this would be my advice here. Now, as to the number of colors, I would suggest that once again you compromise and do not go for those very cheap but extremely large sets where you have, I don't know, 25, 30, 40 colors. And do not opt for those that are only composed of like 6 colors, because we are not all Zorn, right? We are not all capable of mixing the perfect undertone right from the beginning. Especially if you are trying oils out, you have to get used to how the pigments interact together, how much of one color and another you have to mix together in order to get another one, which colors are transparent, which are not so much so. Yeah, so you have to find a compromise. I would not go below 12, which will basically give you a black, a white, a yellow, an orange, 2 reds, turquoise, blue, ochre brown, maybe 2 greens. This is more or less what I would go for. Now comes the very, very painful question of mediums. And when I say mediums, I obviously include everything in it, like thinners and stuff like that, okay? The most obvious and simple one here is you would need to find a way to clean your paint off your brush, right? So once you have come to the understanding that you like oil painting and you would want to keep going, you would invest in a big bottle like this one of a brush cleaner, okay? Which you would pour into something like this in order to keep your brushes in it and keep them moist and facilitate the very thorough cleaning coming afterwards. I don't think that you would absolutely need to do it as a beginner. I think what you should do is buy turpentine or a mineral spirit. Personally, I always prefer turpentine, which has a double function. It is a thinner, so you would need to buy it to paint anyway, but you can also use it to clean the fresh paint off your brushes. Then you would clean the rest. Once you've put them into the turpentine, wiggled it around a little bit, you would then need a cloth, just regular cloth like this, okay, where you would clean your brush on it. And then once you are finished with your painting session, I would suggest you go for something that helps you both keep your brushes clean but also maintain them. So some sort of cleaning soap. I'm currently using a Da Vinci one, which is fairly cheap. I believe I paid 15 euros for this. I have bought this one in the beginning of the year and I'm not even a quarter through it. So this is a very economical way of cleaning your brushes. And there is another brand that is doing the exact same thing. I believe it's called Old Master something. I will add it just in the description box. which is very good as well. They are both very good. This one has maybe a stronger lemony scent, which I would not necessarily recommend, but I believe that these are cheaper. To clean your brushes, do not buy brush cleaner, buy turpentine, buy a cloth, and buy the soap. So turpentine to clean your brushes, but also turpentine in order to dissolve or thin your paint. What makes oil painting complicated is that there's a lot of mixture and like chemical work involved in it, and you have to understand some part of the process, okay? And while you don't need to go into too much detail and understanding at the beginning, you do need to understand that there is a difference between a thinner and a medium, okay? A thinner really allows you to go from a very oily, pasty texture of the oil paint to something that is quite diluted and has a thin layer of pigment in it. For instance, when you are starting on a cardboard or on a canvas, really there's no difference in the process. You cannot, or you should not, go with a thick layer of paint coming directly out of the tube onto the canvas, right? Because the chemical adherence between the paint and straight out of the tube and the canvas would not happen right away, right? So your paint will dry down and crumble. In order to help the adhesive process between the paint and the canvas, you have to first use a very thin layer of some sort of paint. So what you would do is you mix a little bit of turpentine into your oil paint and apply this mixture in a very thin layer onto your canvas or your cardboard. And once it sets down and dries down, basically the turpentine within it would have dissolved everything that is oily, let's say, in your paint tube, so that everything you're left with are the pigments within the tube that are penetrating into the canvas. Once again, I say turpentine, but you can also use mineral essence, for instance. I only ever use turpentine. I believe that it is the best solution to dilute oil paintings. Now, this is where it becomes more difficult, because you have probably already heard of the fat over lean rule in oil paintings, so that there is a particular order in which you have to apply your paints that have different composition. So you start out with a layer that is not oil free but very lean, so very much dissolved. And while you can totally build up the colors using only turpentine, you would lose the translucent effect, basically, because you would then pile pigment upon pigment upon pigment without benefiting from the semi-transparent quality of the oil paints, without using glazing and stuff like that, which is very interesting if you overlay semi-transparent types of colors. And to achieve exactly this effect, where you layer semi-transparent layers of color on top of each other, you will need to add some medium. And this is where it gets complicated, because there are a ton of different mediums out there that all have the same purpose but with different side effects, let's say. The common purpose being it helps to make your paint coming out of the tube more smooth, more fluent, and also to not thin it out per se, but give it a more transparent quality, right? So all mediums would do that, but where they will differ is some quicken the dry time, some lengthen the dry time, some will give your paint a yellowish undertone. There is a lot of choices out there. So for someone who is a beginner, who is confronted with all these kinds of characteristics of oil paints for the first time, I would suggest you go for something fairly universal. And in my very personal opinion, this would be the Turner Gloss Medium. It doesn't really quicken the drying time, but it doesn't leave your paints sticky for weeks and weeks at a time neither. It doesn't, in my opinion and in my experience, give a particular tint to your colors. What it will do is it will give a nice glossy aspect to your colors, because this is another side effect that can occur. Some are helping your colors to be very shiny, others will make them look matte. This will depend on which medium you're going for. I don't believe that there is a universal answer for everyone. I think this is maybe the most personal part of the recommendation, because I believe that if you ask 5 different artists what medium they would recommend for a beginner, 5 will give 6 different answers. Okay, so mine would be the Turner medium. Make of it what you will. Now, in order to mix the mediums or the medium and the dissolvent together, you will need some components to put them into. The most frequent one that you will find are those little tin components, I don't know, that you can slide onto your color palette. Well, classically you would put the turpentine in one component and then the medium in the other one, or you can maybe pre-mix something that is half turpentine and half medium, and then going forward, remember the fat over lean rule, something that is more medium and, like, I don't know, 70% medium and 30% turpentine maybe. So this comes in quite handy. This doesn't cost much, so I would definitely recommend buying at least one of those double components or 2 single ones. And now the brushes. I would follow the same rule as for the paints, right? Your main goal is to be able to try out different techniques without leaving too much money in the process. This means I would advise you to refrain from investing in natural hair brushes, because I don't believe that this is very useful in the beginning, for 2 reasons actually. First of all, they are crazy expensive, and you will only feel the benefit if you do not want your brush strokes to be very textured. So if you are painting in a very smooth style, then this is where it would be interesting. But once again, to warrant the price, I'd better be sure whether I would want to continue in this direction, right? So synthetic bristles will 100% do the work for you. There is no stigma at all. I mostly use synthetic brushes, for instance, because I like when there's a little bit of texture in the brush strokes. So this is more convenient for me, and also longevity. I'm sorry, but a natural hairbrush will never last you as long as a synthetic one. That's a fact. As to what type of brushes you would need, I would go for a set that includes different forms of brushes. So flat square ones, round ones, finer ones, larger ones. The more diverse the set is, the better it is for you, because I believe that paintings that are most interesting are those that include the more diverse brushwork. And this is really what makes a painting look alive, is that it's not repetitive. If your brush strokes are too repetitive, it will look unnatural really quickly. And this is why I would advise you to vary your brushes as frequently as possible in order to achieve those more complex appearances. Once again, I can go onto Jackson's Art website and see what I can pull out of my hat, what sets are available and what brands you should be looking for. Let's see what I can find. Right, brushes, brush sets to use with oil. I had very good experiences with the Jackson's line, their own line. I have several flat square brushes from them and they are great. So I believe that this is the type of quality you can completely start with. Winsor & Newton brushes are all right. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm not sure I would recommend them. The Pro Arty are great. So there is a set with a flat square brush. Well, this is maybe a bit specific. What else is there? There are 2 sets of Jackson's oil and acrylic brushes. It is good. This is probably what I would recommend you use. I don't know if I would like pick up a set where you have the same type of brush but in different sizes. I'm not sure that this is really helpful in the beginning, where you would want to just experiment with what you can do with oil painting. So I would basically go for the most diverse set that there is. Honestly, the Jackson's Akoya White Synthetic Bristle Hairbrush set looks like maybe the best option out there. It is quite diverse. You have 3 types of brushes. You have 1 flat square, 1 flat round and 1 round, and all of them come in 2 different sizes. I believe that this is a good place to start. It's not cheap, but it's a good quality with a good variation. And then you have something a bit similar for nearly the same price. You have the Jackson's Shinko Red Synthetic Bristle Hairbrush set of 9. Similar composition with more round brushes. This is another good one, so whichever tickles your pickle more. Yes, I would probably start with something like that and pretty basic forms to begin with. So I would really stay away from those very special effect brushes, except in very specific cases. For instance, were you to tell me that you want to experiment with oil paintings, but all you are interested in is painting the sky and painting like clouds and stuff, then I would tell you to go probably for the Pro Arty one, which is a very round and very dense brush, which is great for buffing in colors. But other than this particular case, do you really need it to begin with? Not sure. Same goes for like all of those brushes. So for instance, the doe foot one and the stiff bristle brush, or the one that is, how should I say, it's forked a little bit, so there are bits missing voluntarily. They are a bit pricey were you to invest, especially in several of them, but quite useful if you are painting a lot of grasses and like bushes and stuff. If this is not exclusively what you do or not predominantly what you do, I would stay clear of them in the beginning. And if you go along and come to the conclusion that this is really what you love and that you would want to continue in oil painting, then I would start to invest in those types of brushes because they will save you time. Now, if you would want to pre-draw what you are painting on the canvas, obviously pencils will not be of a great help, because as soon as the turpentine and the color will touch the graphite of the pencil, well, it will dissolve. So this is maybe a particularity that you will have to keep in mind if you are more used to watercolors and gouache and even acrylics, basically, because acrylics do cover up pencils pretty quickly, but it does shine through for the first layer, so it's not that much of a problem. Now there are two different options of what you can do. The one will require another purchase, the other one will not. Obviously the most economic option here would be to directly do your drawing with a thin layer of color. This is what I do because oil paintings are extremely forgiving. If you are not sure of a line, if you want to take it out while the paint is wet, you can rub it off either with a cloth or, I don't know, your own hand, anything really. It comes off pretty quickly. Now I also completely understand if this is something that you would shy away from in the beginning and you would want to have the security of a finished underpainting, drawing, whatever, before you start applying the colors. In this case, I would suggest you buy a acrylic marker. I have one from PBO, which I used when I first started out, or if I have something that is incredibly architectural and I need to be very precise about, then I used these ones, but honestly nowadays I never touch them. I still have one that is not even open yet. So this is up to you. This doesn't cost much. If it helps you get into the process and be more sure about what you do, then knock yourselves out. Just know that you will need more layers of oil paint to cover this up, because it's not transparent, obviously. It's a thin layer of acrylic with a very precise, well, nozzle, let's say. So it will leave a trace and you will need to build up your color over several sessions in order to completely cover it up. And maybe the last tool that I would comment on is the palette knife. Honestly, I would not recommend you to buy one, although there are very cheap alternatives out there. But it's simply a matter of learning how to use oil paints. I wouldn't bother with this because, first of all, you will use up a lot of more paint when using those. So for economic reasons, maybe do not start with this. Second of all, you need to have a better understanding of the fat over lean rule, because whenever you start applying paint in a thick layer like this with a palette knife, you need to understand what is happening underneath your layer of paint and what you will do on top of it. For instance, in order to obtain something that is fairly thick like this, right, you would need to nearly use the paint straight out of the tube with not that much medium, none of the turpentine, maybe some thickener like paste that you mix into your colors to make it more thick like that. So you would really need to remember that you cannot go with a thin layer with turpentine, for instance, over it. This would not work well chemically. So I believe that this is something that is maybe too complex in the beginning. It's more a headache than anything else. You are doing yourself a disservice to begin with this, I believe. But once again, this is a very personal advice. Maybe you are going into oil paintings only because you can use thick layers of paint. I don't know. I don't believe that this is maybe the case for most of us. So once again, unless you think that this is majorly important for the way that you are creating and for your style, I would steer clear of this in the beginning. All right, and I believe that this concludes our session for today. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. I believe that we've spoken about the most important tools and materials that you would need were you to start out in oil paintings. Honestly, I wouldn't bother with anything else. You don't need to think about varnishes and stuff because, once again, in the beginning you are mainly experimenting with the medium in itself. You are getting to know the different techniques, trying out color combinations. Maybe start with experimenting with medium and other types of brushes before going into how do I varnish a painting, because these are really finishing touches. So this was not something I forgot. This is a recommendation. If you feel like I left something out, if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to leave a comment and ask me anything you need to ask regarding the tools and materials. I hope I can be helpful. And please keep in mind that, once again, these are very personal recommendations, and I do firmly believe that they will differ from artist to artist. So this is my take on the essentials to start in oil painting. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. Thank you so much for turning in for this little session, and as always, I hope to see you in my next video very soon. Until then, have a lovely morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world. Cheers, guys!